Off with a brief introduction to the speaker, Ms. Debbie Dar. So I would request Dr. Varghese, who is a faculty at the Division of Medical Informatics, to kindly introduce the speaker. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker. She is the Senior Commissioning Editor in the journals team at Sage India. She has a decade's worth of experience in publishing and has worked with major publishing houses such as Pearson Education and Paragon Publishing in diverse profiles. She has worked in textbooks, trade books, encyclopedias, coffee table books, and illustrated fiction books. She is currently the journal's commissioning in charge at Sage, where she's been handling academic journals for the last 5 years. That includes the humanities and social sciences journals and the science, technology, and medicine journals, as well as a program called the Sage Spectrum Journal Publishing Services. So please join me in welcoming Debbie Dar on stage.
Hello, everyone. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. So today I'm here to conduct a workshop on how to get published in peer-reviewed and indexed journals. So of course it will be mainly from a publisher perspective, but what I will be taking you through is basically the entire author journey, where you will get to see what goes on in terms of the entire process of just selecting a journal, even in terms of thinking about research, in terms of ways to identify what makes for a good journal, and what we need to keep in mind while submitting to a journal and ensuring we are following the guidelines, we are trying to meet the editor expectations, the reviewer expectations. And of course, I also take you behind the curtain on what goes on when the articles reach the publisher at the production stage, and then we move on to promotions and things like that. So you'll get an idea of the entire author journey here. I'll take questions at the end of the session, so please feel free to raise as many questions, comments that you would like to share at the end. I'll just give you a brief introduction to Sage. So we are the largest independent academic publisher. Independence with impact is basically our tagline. Founded by Sarah Miller McCune in 1965, 2,000 employees, 1,100 plus journals with 200 plus gold OA journals, tie-ups with 400 plus societies, and we have online products, Sage Business Cases, Sage Video, etc. Now coming to the kind of collaborations we already have in place, so you would see that we have different kinds of collaborations with societies like the World Stroke Organization, the Indian Stroke Association, the Rajiv Gandhi Cancer Institute and Research Center, the Royal Society of Medicine, Cardiological Society of India, Telangana chapter. Then we also have the Indian Academy of Neurosciences, and so on and so forth. Now coming to the entire author journey. So if you now look at it, it starts with the first step, which is securing funding, then moves on to conducting research, writing your article, submitting it, peer review, revisions, and then online publication, print publication, promotions, and so on. The entire cycle starts again from that point. Now coming to why you should publish. So they can be Now coming to why you should publish. There can be various reasons. For example, you want to disseminate your research findings to the community. You want to make a contribution to your field of study. Maybe you can influence policy and practice. And of course, career advancement, that's also another aspect. You know, your promotion kind of depends upon your research publication. And most importantly, the research you publish will be validated through the peer review process. I will come to what it means, of course, to be peer reviewed. Peer review basically means to be your scientific and medical research is being validated. It's going through a review by peers, by experts in your own field. So that is the entire meaning of being published in research. Now, questions to ask yourself. Look at the target audience. Who is going to be interested? This is very, very important, because basis this, you can decide which journal to target further. Thank you. Which journal to target further? How it builds on what you already know, what the field already knows. Have you taken into account what the literature is saying? Have you done your literature review? How significant is your message? How sure are you of your findings? And is this novel, innovative work, is this extending an existing theory, filling a gap, showing that maybe conventional wisdom was mistaken? So ask yourself all of these questions when you're even starting the entire process of research. Now, tips to getting started. Of course, writing takes a lot of time and energy, so plan it out as much as possible. Ensure you have enough material, research and data. Read current journal articles in your field of study. Literature review always needs to be very strong here. You can also think of finding an experienced writer, a mentor from the field, and of course outline and organize your manuscript as much as possible. You can, go through it again, read, reread, revise it. Just let it, stay with you. Take some time to, think over it, and then decide what you want to do next. You can also use external resources like the SAGE Author Gateway for further guidance. In fact, when you are, going through these kind of other platforms, you will get a lot of information that you can go through in terms of things to keep in mind while, moving forward. Now, what is authorship? So, there are various criteria which define an author. It is someone who has made a substantial contribution to the concept, design of the work, in the acquisition analysis, has drafted the article or revised it critically for important intellectual content, approved the version to be published, and has participated sufficiently to take public responsibility for appropriate portions of the content. So this is very, very important. If your name is going on that article, that means as an author, you are going to be able to fulfill these criteria. There could be other people who have contributed further and, but maybe do not fulfill these criteria. They should be and they can be acknowledged in the acknowledgement section. There is also, there are different rules or definitions in place. So there is something called credit. You can look it up, which defines the definition of an author in terms of 14 positions in terms of the entire taxonomy of what is the definition of an author. As an aspiring author, one also needs to think about creating an ORCID profile, because this will ensure that you have a unique identifier as an author. This will create a clear and unambiguous record of your research, and you can obviously record all your articles there. If, for example, I as a Debbie Dhar am publishing an article and there is one more Debbie or Debbie Dhar out there, there will never be any cause for mistaken identity or in terms of confusion there. So the ORCID profile is very important as an author to have a unique identifier. Now coming to choosing a journal. So there can be various things to keep in mind. Of course, one is the reputation of the journal. How much do you know of the journal? How much have you heard about it from your peers, from your faculty, from people around you, and what is being said? So, what is the reputation of the journal? What is the reputation of the publisher? For example, is it a publisher like Sage? Are they following ethical practices? So, all of these aspects come into mind. Second is paper type. So, if for example, you submit a research paper into a case report journal, it will most likely get rejected in the first stage itself. And that is basically called desk rejection. So, it's important to be clear on what kind of journal you're submitting to and what is the paper type of your article. Third is looking at the authors and reference list. So, when you're framing your article, the reference list that you prepare actually can be a good selection of the kind of journals you can target. They might in fact be an appropriate fit in terms of the scope, in terms of the target audience that you want should be covered there. And then of course the most important aspect is the aims and scope, where you need to ensure that it is within the scope of that journal. It should not, like I said earlier, it can't be a research paper in a case report journal, or for example, if a journal accepts papers only from a particular geographical area and you are beyond that geographical scope, again it might be a cause for desk rejection. Then of course one can keep in mind the editorial board. One can see how reputed, how known they are, how diverse is the editorial board. Some journals also mention the acceptance rate or the rejection rate for that matter, and even the turnaround time. So if the articles are being, so here it's actually a tricky situation. One thing to keep in mind is that if as an aspiring author you want to immediately target an impact factor SCI index journal, and you are thinking that that's where I want to target, but probably they have a very high rejection rate. That means it will be very likely not accepted. So you might need to decide that, okay, maybe you want to look at a decently indexed midway journal which has got 40% or 50% acceptance rate, which has got higher chances for your article to get included. Looking at peer review also is quite important, where you see that what kind of peer review is being followed. The most common model is double blind, which otherwise at Sage we call it double anonymized. So where neither author or reviewer know each other's details. So while submitting the article, it's important to completely blind the manuscript so that there are no details easily accessible or available. There are other kinds of peer review as well, which I will be covering in a later slide, but it's most important to follow the right process as per the peer review model of the journal. The last few aspects to keep in mind is, of course, the readership in terms of what kind of, maybe you could look at the download metrics even, or the audience that is, it's being targeted at. In terms, you could see it mentioned in the scope. The indexing metrics, where if it's a Scopus index journal or a PMC index journal or a impact factor journal. So those are aspects to keep in mind. Or if you're starting out, you could first consider DOAJ open access journal. And of course, to keep in mind funding and institutional restrictions. So if there is a certain journal that you want to publish in and it is behind a paywall, but your institution requires you to publish your article completely open access, but you specifically want to target this particular journal, you can always use options like we have something called Sage Choice. So it allows you to make your article open access in a hybrid journal as well, in a subscription-based journal as well, after a certain publication charge. Now, coming to preparing for submission, and I cannot stress this enough, the first aspect is please read and follow the manuscript submission guidelines in detail. It might seem something very simple, but it would be very much appreciated when this is done by editors, by reviewers, by everybody. You can make every effort to improve the quality of your manuscript, be objective as possible, abide by research ethics, and of course, most importantly, mention all possible statements, funding statements, conflict of interest statements, informed consent statements, Even if you have none, even if it is not required, declare that it is not required. You know. Now coming to article structure. So the first is thinking of the article title. So it should be short, eye-catchy, as we are in today's days and time, to the point and unique as much as possible. One can also think about building in a keyword into the article title if possible. In fact, this is something that many people try to do, that the keywords that you want to use, you build it into the article title, you build it into the abstract, so that it is already in pops up in the search. Certain journals, when it comes to keywords, also have a certain bank of keywords mentioned on the submission guidelines. So you need to go through that list and use those specific keywords if applicable. Author details, of course, should be mentioned separately for anonymized review, otherwise known as blind review. Name, affiliation, all of the details. It's important to mention the even your geographical city, country, all of those details, because that kind of completes the entire information for the journal while it's being published. Abstract in terms of giving a brief summary of your article, and this is basically the face of your article. So basis your abstract is the reviewers will decide whether they will go review your article or not. So it's good to spend quite some time and effort on preparing the abstract. Now coming to the actual structure in terms of the content. So first we have the introduction, which is giving the purpose of the study. What was the hypothesis you wanted to prove? What did you research? And what is the question you are addressing? As these questions are covered in the introduction, you need to ensure that this gets answered later in the discussion. So I'll come to that. Now moving from the introduction, it should be interrelated and flow logically to the materials and methodology. Here you talk about which method you used, what was your technique, maybe what sample you used, how did you select them, if you obtained ethics and informed consent, approval and informed consent as applicable. And what is most important is the way you frame your methodology should be such that anyone out there in the future, if they want to replicate your research, they should be able to do so. The principles of FAIR is very important nowadays, which we basically mean findable, accessible, interoperable, reproducible. So reproducible is key here, that the methodology that you put, it should be such that somebody out there can replicate your research and is clear. Then we have the results section, which talks about the answers you received, what was your data, and what complications you arose. Last two sections we usually suggest to keep it separate unless the submission guidelines instruct you otherwise. So the discussion and the conclusion sections are kept separate. The discussion talks about what the results mean, what they imply, what was the impact of previous studies, how is the data of the new trial related to totality, how does this answer the question in the introduction, very, very important. Conclusion can talk about implications of the research in terms of future studies recommended, what were the limitations, and so on and so forth. Lastly, but not the least, we also have the acknowledgement section where you can detail any contributors who cannot be listed as authors, statements and declarations in terms of conflict of interest declaration, funding statements, informed consent statements. Even if none exist, please document. Reference list, you can list all the articles cited within the paper. It should follow the style of the journal. It could be AMA or Chicago manual style or any other style. Supporting materials, if you want to provide any supplemental material, any data sets, any videos, audio files, figures or images. Now coming to writing style. So writing style, it's important to build up an academic writing style. By that we usually mean a third person writing style, while of course one has to use some terminology of the field, but can't be too jargon heavy as well. Then moving on to language quality. So it's important to ensure that it is understandable, it's readable. If there is a concern that one feels that one may not be able to cater to the language quality required, one can also access third-party services, author services out there, which can improve the language quality. Cohesiveness, this is important to have a structure in the article. So good to use headers, subheaders, so that they logically flow from one theme to the other. And to use bias-free inclusive language. This is becoming more and more important in today's days and times. In fact, as journals are looking at in terms of geographical diversity, whether in terms of authorship, reviewership, editorial board, they are now looking beyond as well. So they are also looking at diversity in terms of other aspects of life, whether in terms of if people are from any kind of minority. So in an extension of that, inclusion, if we look at the terms of DEI, inclusion is also becoming an important aspect, using inclusive language. For example, if one is doing a study on race, and ancestry, and one has some findings and which suggest in terms of medical findings even that that these are certain factors that imply certain facts of life, but which could create some kind of controversial scenario. It's good to put in that kind of a disclaimer that these are the limitations of this research as well. So that you are considering this kind of a sample size, this is the outcome, and all of these aspects have been taken into account. Now also it's important to have proper reporting guidelines, so to follow the guidelines that are to be used as per your area of research. Important to make the contribution to the field clear. So what I was mentioning earlier about what you put as the question in the introduction should be answered in the discussion section. So that answer that you provide there basically should make your the contribution to the field clear. Appropriateness of literature review and references. So this is important because it also shows that you've done your study of the existing literature in the field, and that it is grounded in theory. You've built up from somewhere. Even if whether it's an extension of that, or if it's something which is countering it, or it's something novel. But either which way, it's good to have strong literature review. And descriptive figure legends. So if you put figures, it should be clear what it's implying and how you're explaining it. Somebody should not need to go back to the results section and try to correlate the two and understand what it means. Now coming to study design, again it's good to use the study design which is most appropriate for your area, for your field of study. In terms of the overall structure, as I was mentioning earlier, reproducibility of the methodology, that is very, very important as per the principles of FAIR. Appropriateness of the right methodology in place, and of course relevance of the statistical techniques that you are using. Now coming to the results, discussion, conclusion and limitations. So here again it's important to keep these questions in mind while framing these sections. So are the results presented in a way that best emphasizes the findings? Are these sections free of unsupported generalizations or assumptions? What I was mentioning earlier about bias-free inclusive language, it also kind of extends and links back to this point. Are the conclusions appropriate for the study, and are there appropriate limitations and directions for future research? It's always important to highlight whatever limitations were there. Now how to present data? So when it comes to quantitative studies, of course we want to make it very informative. Demographic data as an example is usually presented first. You again remind the reader of the research question being addressed, the hypothesis being tested, and state which differences are significant. You can highlight the important trends and differences and showcase how the hypothesis is supported. It's always important to supplement it with figures, graphs, tables as applicable. When it comes to experimental studies, again, as I said earlier, results is almost always presented separately from the discussion, best illustrated in tables and figures. You can use text to introduce them, point out the differences and relationships, and include negative results also as applicable. Lastly, for qualitative studies, presentation and discussion of qualitative data is often combined, usually expressed in words, and that's where the headings and subheadings become very, very important, so that it's well structured and logically flows from one section to the other. It's a bit of a repetition here, so I'm just quickly glossing through this. With tables, you can highlight precise numerical values, summarize large amount of data, proportions or trends. With graphs, again, important to show trends through graphs and define the symbols and lines used in the legends. When it comes to images that you are providing with the article, again, see the author guidelines, submission guidelines for any image sizing and specifics there. For example, 300 dpi might be a requirement. If it's not possible to reach that, then provide whatever is the best possible image. Supply the highest, like I said, highest quality format. Keep the edits down. So if you have, for example, done some edits, ideal is to disclose those edits, and you should also keep the original available with you. So, for example, if the editor requests back for the original image, you should be able to provide that. Now coming to helping your readers find your articles. So here again, a well-written title and abstract becomes very important. Good keywords, repetition of the keywords. You can ensure the keywords are somewhat repeated throughout the article, in the title, abstract if possible, and keeping the users in mind. So you should actually go and search, on how would you make your article findable. Search it on Google. Basically, the way we use our everyday social media on Facebook or Instagram, the hashtags that we need to use them for a scholarly academic article as well. Now coming to the submission checklist. So we've done quite a lot of homework. Now again, we need to have another checklist in mind while submitting the article. So look at the journal specific requirements. Are there any word limits? Word limits as per article type, in terms of research paper, review paper, case report, even word limits in terms of abstract. Look at the article structure on how it needs to be framed. Is the, for example, results, discussion, conclusion, is it a separate, or it's separate, or it's supposed to be combined in some way? Reference style, which reference style it's following, AMA, Vancouver, Chicago style. Guidance on title, abstract and keywords. Again, if the journal has a specific bank of keywords, you need to use that. How to even describe or number figures and legends. It should be figure 1.1 or figure 1A or FIG, however it is. Most important, ensure there are no identifying features in your manuscript to facilitate anonymous peer review, which is usually the case. Use English language editing services if required to improve language quality. You can also prepare a cover letter to go along with the article, and you do need to obtain permission for all copyrighted material. So that is very, very important. And lastly, if required, you can also consider adding any supplemental data. Now coming to common mistakes to avoid. So like I mentioned earlier, you would hear this as a refrain throughout my session. Not thoroughly reviewing submission guidelines. That's very, very important. Incorrect formatting of tables and figures. Not an appropriate fit for the journal, it was out of scope. Wrong manuscript type, like I mentioned earlier, or poor grammar and syntax even. So now you come to submitting your manuscript. Submit to one journal at a time. You can send it via an online manuscript submission system like Sage Track Sage, or the journal editor email ID as mentioned on the guidelines, and follow the steps outlined in the platform. Now, why do papers get rejected before peer review? So it's kind of in line with what I mentioned earlier in the common mistakes. So poor fit with the journal, poor presentation, formatting, spelling, and of course there could be weak methodology or inadequate literature base in terms of the review. Now what is peer review? As I said earlier, it's a process where peers, where scientists who are your peers evaluate the quality of other scientists' work. By doing this, it is to ensure that the research is validated, it is rigorous, it is coherent, and adds to the entire field. Now, how does it work? So it starts with paper submission, then is checked for compliance with journal guidelines. We see if it's fit within the journal's aims and scope. If it does not fit, it might be rejected by the editor. Sent out for peer review. Peer reviewers are selected. Emails are sent to the reviewers. Some reviewers decline. Finally, two reviewers have accepted to review the papers. Then the paper appears in the reviewer center, and the reviewer makes recommendations to the editor. So as I said earlier, there are different types of peer review. There is also single anonymous peer review, where the name of the reviewer is hidden from the author. Then double anonymous, where both details are hidden from each other. And open or transparent peer review, which is not very common yet, where everyone is openly identified. So you need to understand the peer review model before submitting. So first is, of course, as I showed the entire peer review journey, there's the initial decision by the editor. Then the peer review takes place. There are two reviewers who have accepted. They would make recommendations to the editor, and there can be four possible outcomes. One is they might reject outright. There could be acceptance, or acceptance with major revisions, or acceptance with minor revisions. Usually we see major or minor revisions in place. Now, why are papers rejected after peer review? Either reviewers were not convinced of the contribution to the knowledge base, or methodology was not robust enough for the journal, depending upon what kind of article it was, quantitative, qualitative. Specific sections were weak, or paper was ill-focused, fundamentally flawed. Handling rejections. So of course, it's difficult to do that, but we would ask everybody to try and take it in stride, and to use it for the next possible goal. You can read the reviewer comments and editor's letter carefully, focus on why the manuscript was rejected, and rework the paper to address those reviewer concerns and submit to another journal. In fact, at one point when I was attending one editor conclave, there was a suggestion, not a suggestion, in fact, an observation that was shared by one of the editors there, that there was an author out there who used to identify a very yeah, I think the signal is gone. Yeah, so observe that there was an author out there who used to send out papers to a very top-notch impact factor journal, which used to do a very detailed, rigorous review, and maybe reject his articles and send it back. And he used to use that as data to enhance his article and resubmit it to other journals out there. It was actually a strategy that he employed. So that was one thing that was an observation. In fact, that another editor was mentioning, who was leading who was the current editor-in-chief of that journal, said that even for their own paper, when they were writing the papers, they take a lot of time to first plan it out, to work on it, and they at least spend 6 months working on the paper, so to enhance the manuscript and to make it reach the quality that they would want it to. Now coming to handling revisions. So again, you can read the reviewer comments and editor's letter carefully. Follow the time frames requested, very, very important. Clearly demonstrate what you have changed point by point. You can address each referee point in a separate document, and if you can't meet all the criticisms, just be polite and explain why, and what your reasoning and rationale is. Just also be aware that this entire process can take 2 to 3 iterations and repetitions. Congratulations, your paper has finally been accepted after a lot of hard work, and now it's but the work doesn't stop here. Now it's time to move on to the next stage. Now, after the article has been accepted and you have signed the copyright agreement forms, it goes to the production teams at the publishing house, like for example at Sage. It would go through copy editing, typesetting, then PDF proofs are generated which are sent to the authors for their review. At this stage, even the editors can review the PDF proofs. Corrections are collated and the revised PDF is created. Finally, the article is then published ahead of print, otherwise known as online first at Sage, before it's assigned to an issue. Simultaneously, it is sent to press for print publication, and it is also made available, if it's a paid journal, to subscribers in print and online. The PDF of the article is also sent to the corresponding author for author access. So the process doesn't end with publication. You need to promote your article. So you can utilize social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook to promote your article, share on relevant blogs and scholarly communication networks, including ResearchGate. You can notify your colleagues and peers, and even issue a press release via your institution if possible, which could lead to broader news pickup. There are also, as you can see the link here, there are some guides on how you can promote your article better. The Sage Journal Author Gateway has a lot of tips and tricks on these aspects. You can feel free to check it out. Now coming to author reuse. So I'd like to touch upon this in short on the various versions of reuse of article. So for example, here if you submitted an article and published it in a journal specifically where the journal is content is behind a paywall, it's a subscription based hybrid journal. So these are the ways in which you can reuse the article. So you can share the original submission or accepted manuscript at any time and in any format, at least as per the the scenario here. Then you can also ensure that that this includes posting a downloadable copy on any website, saving it on a repository or network, as long as it is non-commercial and non-derivative use. That's very, very important. You can also use the final published PDF in restricted ways. For example, for your own teaching, where the electronic distribution has restricted access, to share on individual basis with research colleagues, as long as it is not for commercial purposes, in your dissertation or thesis, where it could be posted in an electronic institutional repository, or in a book authored or edited by you at any time after the contributor's publication in the journal. So when it says book authored or edited by you, does not mean a book where you've contributed a chapter. Not there. The book needs to be actually have your name as the author or the editor. Now coming to open access journals, which is most common, I believe. Here you would see that open access journals are of different kinds. They can be platinum or diamond open access journals, which is basically means there is no article processing charge, there is no fee for authors to pay, and most probably it's society funded. Or they can be gold open access journals, where it is APC article processing charges are there. And in these journals, all articles are made freely available under a Creative Commons license. So at Sage, most articles are made available under a CC BY NC 4.0 license with a CC BY option. So what CC BY NC means? CC means Creative Commons. BY means by attribution. Give credit, attribute it. NC means non-commercial. So as long as it is, you can reshare it as long as the right credit is given for a non-commercial use. On the other hand, what is CC BY? CC means again Creative Commons. BY means by attribution. Give credit. So here you can reuse the article as long as you give credit for any use, including commercial use. And under this license, basically authors are allowed to retain copyright of their particular work of the article, while allowing others to copy, distribute and make further use of the work. In fact, at Sage, we also have a number of open access transformative agreements in place. Recently, Sage also signed an agreement with Mahe in India, and we also have agreements with Australia and New Zealand as well. Now coming to additional tips. So as I mentioned earlier, you can explore Sage Choice as per funding body requirements. So if you want to publish in a particular journal which is behind a paywall, you can make you have to make your article open access, you can use this option. Secondly, create a profile on ORCID is very, very important as an aspiring author. For all aspiring authors, we also recommend to be an aspiring reviewer, because that is how you will kind of facilitate the entire ecosystem and give a push to it. So also make a profile on Web of Science Review Recognition platform, otherwise known as Publons. You can also use this third-party website called thinkchecksubmit.org to identify if a journal is trustworthy. So if you go through their website, and see the kind of questions that are posed is basically the kind of questions I've brought forward in this workshop today on how to identify a journal as a trustworthy journal. So you can look at if they have clear submission guidelines, if the fees are clearly mentioned there, how is the publisher, can the publisher be easily contacted, are the details there of their, the complete, turnaround times and things like that. Having said that, when you go through that checklist, it's not that each journal will be able to tick off every point, but if most of the key parts are covered, that means it's a trustworthy journal. You can also register for free for a how to get published online course on Sage Campus. It's a 1-hour module. It's completely free. If you want a refresher on this session. There are also multiple how to get published Sage webinars on this particular link. In fact, there are breakups of different kinds of modules there. If you have, for example, an institutional subscription to Sage research methods, you can also use that. And lastly, we also have something called Journal Recommender. I will come to that at the end. So, Sage Research Methods. So, this is basically a product where it gives a lot of tools to help people from every area, whether it's established researchers, starting researchers, faculty. So there are cases, there are data sets, there's videos, data visualization, multimedia collections, and so on and so forth. Now coming to Journal Recommender. Now one easy way to, if you want to search what should be the journal you would want to target from Sage, you can just Google it, Journal Recommender space Sage, and this will come up, this page will come up. So you can put the manuscript title, at least 5 keywords, so, select the subject areas, the indexing you would like, and then the type of journal, all Sage journals, open access journals, or subscription only journals. And then select find journals. When you search, then it will give you a recommended list of journals which is the closest fit for your article. So you can go through that and go through the submission guidelines in detail to see if you can submit to it further. Lastly, as I said earlier, there is the dedicated space for author support, the Sage Journals Author Gateway. You can visit for additional how to get published resources and answers to common author questions, and learn which version of your paper you can share, where and when, what I earlier covered on author reuse and also reuse of articles under open access. That's it from my end, and I'm open to questions.
If you can let us know about the embargo, how does it work, and what the authors need to do during the embargo period?
Embargo for, you mean to say when the journal is in embargo?
Like, I think you're not supposed to, like, till the embargo point, you're not supposed to release anything in the media or...
Okay, okay. Right. In terms of when to reshare the paper, that's what you are talking about. Right. Yeah, so when it comes to author reuse, like I was saying, the original submission and the accepted manuscript can be reshared even for a subscription-based journal, as long as there is no commercial use in place. That can be done. And but having said that, one should also keep in mind that if you if you circulate the original submission everywhere and it is still under peer review, then in the plagiarism check it might come up that it is already plagiarized because it's circulating somewhere on the net. So it's better to actually do this once the article is accepted. Only then you can reuse and circulate your original submission and accepted manuscript. When it comes to the final published PDF, again you can reuse it in limited ways, like for a dissertation or thesis, for a book or a volume authored or edited by you, or where you are ensuring that there is no commercial or derivative use there. So you can reuse it in those contexts, in those limited ways, where for your teaching, research with your colleagues. But if you want to reuse it further, it's better to, take permission from the publisher. So in terms of the embargo, what sir was mentioning earlier, ideally it would be to wait it out till after acceptance, and even further after publication. So the ideal embargo would be after publication, but if you really want to, you can circulate it earlier. Yes.
I had a question regarding use of artificial intelligence to work on your paper and make it more acceptable for the
Right.
publisher. Do you have any tools or do you recommend such techniques?
Right. Yeah, this is a very important area that has come up in today's times. So when it comes at Sage, for example, when it comes to usage of AI, we recommend as much declaration as possible. That if you are using AI, you declare in terms of how you're using it, in what ways you're using it. Having said that, I do know that there will always be a question about that if you use even AI to just check your article in terms of language checks. So then how much do you need to declare that as well? So as long as there is not substantial content reframing, I don't think you need to declare. Beyond that, you would need to, because one thing to always keep in mind, there was an entire debate when this AI scene came up, that who is an author? Can AI be declared as an author? Obviously not, because somebody needs to take responsibility for the content being published. As an author, you are supposed to take responsibility for the content you are publishing. So in that context itself, it becomes important to declare how you're using the AI. As long as it's not completely reframing the entire content that you're publishing, it is to some extent all right, advisable that you can use it for simple language checks. But beyond that, you need to declare it.
Just a follow-up question to that, are there published guidelines on for AI use by Sage Publications on your website? For
Yes,
authors?
yes. We do have guidelines for authors for AI use, and in that context, it's basically encouraged to have as much declaration of usage as applicable. If you have used it, it is fine, but you basically need to declare in what ways you've used it.
So there are several tools already available like Quillbot, Typeset, etc., which do a lot of paraphrasing. How much of paraphrasing, these are authors which are using content, but
Right.
they're paraphrasing.
Right.
How much of that has to be declared?
Yes, so this is something I think the entire publishing industry is a little bit on the fence on this. It's not very clear to us also, to some extent. When it comes to the paraphrasing part, we would still, the black and white standpoint would be to still declare even that part. But having said that, it is true that we always want to rephrase something so that it is not being thought of as plagiarized in any way. So that aspect is basically a question of maybe a percentage of how much you are paraphrasing, and are we, in terms of while paraphrasing it, are we completely relying on the AI, or are we doing some checks at our end also?
After the paper is published, are we allowed to upload the publication in ResearchGate, or will it be any violation of any copyright?
No. At least at Sage, for sure, you are in fact allowed and encouraged to upload it on ResearchGate.
Since it is not for commercial purpose, we are allowed.
Yes, yes. In fact, it's for academic circulation and promotion.
Excuse me.
Right.
Thank you for the presentation. A
Thanks.
couple of questions about the review process.
Right.
Suppose if a reviewer has given comments that that are very aggressive, and is it ever okay to raise that as an issue with the editor, or are there instances that are okay to raise concerns with the editor about the reviewers' comments that have come out, either in terms of their interpretation or in terms of just their tone of how they've been addressing you?
Right. So, first of all, I would like to add that ideally an editor's job as a custodian is to even address this part. If a reviewer has put very strong tones in terms of the way they framed it, an editor does have the right to reframe it slightly so that the tonality of it is maintained, so that becomes more neutral. So that's one aspect. Secondly, if that has not happened, it's still gone out as is to an author. And one is, of course, if in terms of there is a disagreement in terms of the thought process there, so that definitely can be iterated in a positive manner. But if in terms of the way the tonality is being mentioned, it can be, it is a, depends upon the scenario from journal to journal. Most editors will take it seriously if an author raises that, okay, the way the tonality of the comments, the review comments are not acceptable because the way it has been framed. But in certain cases, because it's a subjective human process, some editors may not take enough of action, or they may not take it seriously enough. Especially if there's a journal which has got many articles in the pipeline, and they might be overloaded, so it might take even a long time to even get around to that.
And about that overloaded part, suppose it's taking months and months for review to happen, and
Right.
after that it's taking maybe months and months for a decision post-review from the editor.
Right.
Is it ever okay to ask for like an update or anything like that?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's why if journals are mentioning a turnaround time, that we are taking so much time to for initial review, and we'll get back to you, that's more ideal. One can then follow up after that time frame. But otherwise, if an article is taking a long time and there has been no update at all, and one sees that in the submission platform also there is no change in the stage of the article, it's important to query. And one important aspect is that overall, when one is submitting the article, I think one can give at least 2 months time at least in hand to wait it out for the peer review. Sometimes it can take longer if certain journals have actually mentioned they have a very long timeline in terms of peer review turnaround time. Then it's important to keep that in mind. But 2 months is at least minimum to give a journal that much time. Then one can start following up.
I want to ask, generally this ethics statement is a big giveaway of identification. So how does that work with the blind review process?
Sorry.
This statement of ethics is a giveaway of the identification. So how does that work with the blind process?
Right. Because you're saying that with the statement of ethics, one would give the institutional review board's number and things like that, and that's why they can be identified, right? So if that is the concern, and one feels very strongly that then this can be a giveaway, usually there is no foolproof method. One usually provides the institutional review board number there itself, but the second option can be that one mentions that ethics approval has been taken, and that for, the specific details are mentioned in the separate letter where the author details are mentioned. One can do that, but usually that's a rare scenario. Mostly people mention the institutional review board. This is like a bit of a gap area where one is not able to cover that part on certain aspects. This could be identified, but the institutional review board number is actually important. Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what constitutes a good covering letter?
What constitutes a good covering letter? Okay. So basically with the covering letter, I think what I can mention from what I have heard of, I can't really take guarantee on this aspect because I've not really worked on this area of submitting papers, but what we have seen there is if one is identifying what is the main theme in terms of what you want to achieve here, like the contribution, that if you mention that very clearly. Second part is mentioning about that what is your intent in terms of publishing this research. So these are the two main criteria that is important to frame in the cover letter. But beyond that, I would suggest if anybody else would like to share this, because I'm not really the expert to be mentioning about the cover letter. Any other questions? Ma'am. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So we had another workshop a few days back, which
Right.
was on review of literature and using SciSpace and other such resources to do a better review of literature using AI. So if we are using AI to do our review search, literature search basically, and
Right.
we are getting summaries of them by these AI based things, and we might not put them as it is in the paper at
Right.
all, but we are referring to them,
Right.
and then again we'll use AI to paraphrase some aspects. We were told that these things all come under the plagiarism check, which the editorials have. So they have anything that we've run on AI. We were told that they will know that it was once present in any AI's chat search result, and that would come as plagiarism. So how true is that? I mean,
See, I'm not sure exactly how the plagiarism aspect comes in here, because plagiarism will only come up if that content is already out there in the universe. It's published in any form somewhere, and the software is also able to have access to all that content out there and is running it in its system. So then it will be able to access it. That's one thing. Second is what you were saying about using it as AI tool. So yes, that is actually the most ideal way of using AI, when you're using it as a tool and using it to find you know, better literature research in terms of review and others, you know, in terms of summarizing it further. Like even the any everyday products like of Sage I was mentioning earlier, like research methods, they would also use AI only to guide the researchers further. So that is always in place. So that is always a useful tool. But the second part about plagiarism check, I would probably beg to differ there, because it depends on what content is already out there. So if there's, for example, grey literature and somebody has actually published a thesis, but it's not in a repository anywhere and authenticate as a software, doesn't or turn it in, and they all don't have access to it, people won't be able to find out.
okay,
So
so
that's it.
anything that is on AI's interactive chat, just because they have rephrased it, that does not account into plagiarism checks percentage.
Yeah, it
values.
basically is question of that the original source
Right.
material. If that material is being, you know, used and the software has access to that published research,
Okay.
is what I would say.
So using it for paraphrasing, but then disclosing it as well works.
Right.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
While we are publishing, one of the common thing is the methodology will be something which is repetitive. That is, you would have written and then you have to use it from your lab the same methodology. So when you do plagiarism checks, it comes as it is plagiarized. So how do
Right.
you overcome that? Because that's a major challenge we face.
Yes. So you're right about that. And uh, when it comes to things like this, for example, not just methodology, even in terms of references, sometimes that will also come up as you know, plagiarized. So that is something that one needs to have an understanding of, even while like at the editor level only, when it's being you know, it is going through the checks. There also that will be taken into consideration. So for example, at Sage, for example, if then an article is showing up this kind of plagiarism check, so our peer review administrators will actually flag that, okay, it's probably methodology and review reference list, which is something which is anyway expected to come up like this. And it will be flagged to the editor, and the editor will take a decision, okay, this actually is relevant here. It's, you know, one couldn't have changed it any further. It's supposed to be used as this. Doesn't matter here. So plagiarism check and acceptance of plagiarism is also a contextual decision.
Good afternoon all. To maybe this clinical Friday clinical meeting, the session is on plagiarism. That I authenticate person will come to our campus. Then any queries, please ask that day. Maybe we will conduct in this session, in this hall only. This Friday clinical meeting has a plagiarism, related plagiarism, how to avoid plagiarism, how you do your research framework. Everything will that particular that software person itself is coming here. Any queries related to plagiarism and all, please ask and solve your problems and everything. Thank you. any questions? Then we'll come to end of the session. I will hand it over mic to Dr. Nachiket sir to tell about Uptanks.
So first of all, a big round of applause to Ms. Debbie from Sage Publishers for that wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for coming down from Delhi and giving us this presentation. We'd also like to thank the organizers of this talk, Mr. Prasad. He's from Sage Publishers, representative from Bangalore, and our own dynamic head of library services, Dr. Prakash. So a big round of applause to both of them for organizing this session. And of course, we are indebted to Dr. Tony Raj. He's the Dean of the St. John's Research Institute and his entire bioinformatics team and the other team here who look after this wonderful resource here, the Pope Paul Auditorium, Mr. Maharaj and his team, Mr. Ali. So a big round of applause to all of them here, the St. John's Research Institute team. And last but not the least, thank you for coming and participating in large numbers. We'll be having more talks and presentations and workshops like this through the year. And we request all of you to participate in large numbers so that the aim is to make sure that there's a good research ecosystem here in St. John's, and eventually more and more research gets done and more publications come out of St. John's. That's the goal of these sessions. So thank you very much. So coffee is served. Please, you can take coffee and snacks. Thank you.